Hello to Pioneer viewers. As you know, our agenda is the Russia-Ukraine war. The war continues on the front line in all its reality. Both sides are prioritizing attacks. Both sides want to continue the attacks in order to increase their gains. The Russian army is helpless in the face of the Ukrainian attacks. As the situation on the front line continues, opposition to Putin is growing in Russia. In the events of war, states need to be prepared for any eventuality. Political mechanisms should be calculate the consequences of dragging the country into war. It is very difficult for states to sustain a war that is not accepted by the society. In case of war, the people must fight together for a common cause. If this condition is not met, recruitment problems and social problems will grow in the later days of the war. Solving the growing problems become equally difficult. The Ukrainian army is conducting counterattack according to a specific program. Military planning and strategic operational indicators shows that the Ukrainian army has calculated course. Each counterattack prepares the ground for the next one. A well-constructed strategic plan corners the Russian army. The cornered Russian army tries to respond in an unplanned and clumsy manner. As a result, it's faced huge losses. The huge losses on the front line are causing public outrage in Russia. A war that the society cannot accept may have painful consequences for the Kremlin. It is not known what Putin will do, especially before the upcoming elections. If you're ready, let's analyze the latest attacks by the Ukrainian army and the growing reactions against Putin. Last day, a statement was made by the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. And the statement information was given about the counterattacks of the Ukrainian army. According to the information shared, the Ukrainian armed forces are conducting counterattack operations in Melitopol and Bakhmut region. As a result of the Ukrainian army's counterattacks, the troops continue their gains. Russian troops who were exposed to intense fire as a result of the Ukrainian counterattacks are abandoning positions in some area. The Ukrainian army, which cleans the abandoned positions, is increasing its presence in the region. The Russian army is unable to transport its heavy equipment and weapons from the regions where it had to withdraw. As a result, Russian equipment is transferred to the Ukrainian army. 7 Russian artillery units were silenced in the missile attack organized by the artillery units of the Ukrainian army. After the Russian artillery was neutralized, the Ukrainian army made its advance more easily. Ukrainian artillery units also hit 2 Russian command posts. The command posts were heavily damaged. An electronic warfare station of the Russian army was also neutralized by the Ukrainian artillery. The neutralizations of the electronic warfare station was an important achievement for the Ukrainian army. The neutralizations of the Russian combat systems gives the Ukrainian army an important advantage in attacks. Russian radar systems are prevented from seeing Ukrainian attacks. Thanks to this, the Ukrainian army catches the Russian troops unprepared and inflicts heavy damage. The air forces of the Ukrainian armed forces are also continuing their intensive attacks on the Russian troops. The targets hit by unmanned aerial vehicles seem to be very important for the Russian army. According to the information announced the other day, the Ukrainian army carried out 17 attacks on the Russian troops in one day. This was followed by 4 attacks on the Russian anti-aircraft systems. The Ukrainian army's large-scale counterattacks are giving Russian troops a hard time. The Russian army, which has difficulty responding to the attacks, is retreating to defense positions. It seems that the Ukrainian army wants to push the Russian troops to the region close to the border before winter sets in. Developments on the front line are preparing the ground for the new Ukrainian attacks day by day. According to the information we have obtained from local sources, the Ukrainian army is preparing to bring new technological weapons to the front. The Ukrainian technologies that have been announced in the past days seems to change the balances in the war. It is claimed that the Ukrainian army, which has been preparing for a long time, will make big surprises against the Russian army. While developments on the front line continue, important developments are also taking place inside Russia. The growing social opposition in Russia is leading to protests against Putin. A significant part of the public does not support Russia's invasion attempt against Ukraine. The Russian people who think that this invasion attempt is Putin's war react to the negativities. Last day, the wives of the relatives of the Russian soldiers serving in Ukraine organized a protest in Moscow to demand the return of their loved ones to their homes. The protest was attended by a large group of people. It is also rumored that there were many people who could not attend the protest due to the atmosphere of the fear spreading in Russia. According to local sources, the protesters were dispersed in a short time after police intervention. However, dozens of women expressed their reactions until the police set up a cordon and suppressed the protesters. Following Russian President Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, multiple protests have been organized across Russia. However, these anti-war rallies quickly dispersed due to the harsh crackdown by the Russian authorities. Putin has disabled public dissent by signing a law making it illegal for members of the media or Russian citizens to deliberately spread the Kremlin considers to be misinformation about the war. Any attitude or reaction against the Kremlin is covered by the law and carries severe penalties. Sanctions ranging from fines to prison sentences of up to 15 years largely prevent the public from voicing its outrage. It was determined that the wives and relatives of the soldiers organized last day applied for the permission to protest. The permit application was rejected by the Russian authorities. However, the protesters did not accept the reason for the rejection and carried out the protest. After placing flowers on the mausoleum, the protesters expressed their reactions altogether. They shouted, "Bring back our soldiers," and dispersed after police intervention. Shortly after the start of the war, a group of relatives of mobilized Russian servicemen, known as the Council of Mothers and Wives, was formed. Soon after the group began its work, it was accused of espionage by the Russian authorities. Wives and relatives of the Russian soldiers have also frequently posted on social media to express their frustration with the war and how their family members were treated by their commanders. The posts made by relatives of the Russian soldiers reached thousands of people on social media. Very important information was shared to show the realities of the war. It was stated that Russian soldiers on the front line wanted to return home. The anxious waiting of the families is giving way to fear every passing day. The news received from the soldiers causes families to experience greater fears, because the poor living conditions on the front line and the harsh behavior of the commanders cause families to worry. What do you think about the Ukrainian army's counteroffensive operations? How do you think the Russian army can make up for the failed war? What do you think about the growing social opposition in Russia? How do you interpret the protests against Putin? How do you think the preparations of the Ukrainian army will affect the war process? We care about your opinion. Please share it with us.